Today I'm going to show you my favorite method of picking up stitches. We're going to pick up stitches first along a slip stitch edge, like on this blanket that I'm working on, and then we're going to pick up stitches later in the video on just a regular knitted edge. This one has one single edge stitch and garter. So let's do this one first. What you're going to need is a crochet hook and your needle, and the first ones are a little fiddly, but what you're going to do is go through every slipped stitch and pull up a new loop that's going to become your stitch. So once you've got the loop pulled up, just slip it onto your needle, and I like to pull these first ones a little tighter because it keeps the needle in place until you've got enough stitches. So here's the slipped stitch edge. You're going to stick your hook, lose it occasionally. Okay, so we're back to having this needle in. Hold on. Okay, so stick the hook through the slip stitch edge, pull up the new loop, and slip it right onto the needle. Okay, this is a tip that I'll teach you. Sometimes it's helpful to stick your needle through the fabric just to get it anchored. So you can pull up your stitch, stick it on the needle, and then pull up the next stitch and stick it on the needle. It keeps it anchored a little until you can get a few stitches on there. Once you've got about 3, it's usually fine. So at this point, hold on, I'm going to take this out of the knitted fabric. Okay, so we've got 3 stitches picked up. So let's do it again. Through the slip stitch edge, grab, move this, through the slip stitch edge and hook the working yarn, pull up a loop, and stick it on your needle. So once it's started, it goes pretty quickly, especially with this slip stitch edge. So see, we've got 1 stitch coming through each slipped stitch along the edge of the fabric. And then if you work the following row as a knit row, then it will give a nice edge like this. So where this is the side of the original fabric, and this is where we picked up the stitches, it works a purl ridge right next to the picked up stitches, which is really makes a nice clean, crisp finish. So moving on to our other swatch, I like to anchor, if possible, anchor my working yarn to the previous piece. So the gray yarn is the yarn we're going to pick up the stitches with, and the cream yarn is the one that we knit the swatch with. So I like to just do an overhand knot, pushed up snug against the edge. It gives me something to pull against when I tension the yarn. And this is my very favorite tool. It's just a little mini bamboo crochet hook, and it'll fit inside my chibi. So if you've got one of these, they're great. I fill it with all sorts of needles, but if you put it hooked down, it actually fits inside. And so I can keep it with all my tapestry needles. It's great for picking up stitches when you've dropped them, or a whole host of other things. So if you're working on a finished edge, doing something like a button band, picking up a button band, it can be really important that you pick up stitches at the proper rate. So sometimes you need to pick up like 3 stitches for every 4 rows. So as you look, if we spread apart this edge stitch, you can see that there's like a whole little ladder. So if we turn the swatch right side up and we spread this out, pull the edge stitch out, you can see that there's a whole ladder of stitches between. So that's the valley that you want to pick up your stitches from. Now you can do this with the needle if you're adept at it. So it's possible. I always flub it and stuff falls off my needles, so I like to use the crochet hook. It's a little more fiddly at the beginning, but it works really well. So use the crochet hook, stick it through the next ladder hole, pull up a stitch, and slip it with correct orientation onto the needle. So then I do the next one. This yarn is really grippy. Okay, so that's 3. And then if you're doing picking up stitches at the rate of every 3 stitches every 4 rows, then you would skip this next hole and go to the one after and pick up a stitch, put it on your needle. That's 2, and then we'll do a third one before we skip the next one. So what it does is it pushes this edge stitch to the back, which makes a nice clean line on the front. And when you work the button band from there, you get a really nice join between the two.